take my hat off to John for having pointed me in the right direction. You know, as I stand up here and as I came to the high school this morning to a nice get-together of coffee and bagels and what have you, the memories just came flooding back. And the great thing about memories is that they don't have a timestamp. You can remember, or at least I can remember, and I think all of you can remember, things that happened 50 years ago as plainly as you can remember things that happened 2 weeks ago. And as I looked up, I could see Bobby Capadona carrying 3 Brockton linemen into the end zone. Or I could see Richie Green taking a pitch out, cutting to his left, and running 65 yards into the Ringe Tech end zone. I could see my good friend Alan Taylor take the puck from behind our net, pass it up to me on the wing. I slid it out into the center of the ice where my good friend Richie was coming down center ice. He took 1 step over the red line, took a slap shot that hit the upper left-hand corner behind the Stoneham goalie, and to this day, the Stoneham goalie hasn't seen that. And the memories take me back even as far as the Little League, the Watertown East Little League. And I can remember a game when your master of ceremonies, Mr. Norton, thought he was a pitcher. And in the same game, he hung 2 curveballs to yours truly, and I happened to be able to deposit them out somewhere behind the center field fence near the East Junior parking lot. But anyway. Back in October of this past year, my family and I made a trip up to the Boston area to celebrate my sister's birthday. I won't tell them which one, Gail, by the way. And we took a nostalgic trip through Watertown at the time. Richie Green and I did this, and we drove down Marshall Street past the house where Gail and I grew up to Sydney Street, to the house where Richie and his family grew up, and the house which he still owns to this day. And the last thing we did went over to the area, the field, Victory Field, where all of our, you know, there are so many of us here tonight that spent a lot of our early childhood and lifetime at Victory Field. Wonderful place. As I walked through the gates of Victory Field, I couldn't help but think of 2 men who made that place, Jim Ryan and Joe Dwyer. And as I walked over to the first base dugout, here was a plaque on the first base dugout dedicating that dugout to the memory of Jim Ryan and Joe Dwyer. And then we walked out onto the field and got out near the pitcher's mound, and I looked up in the stands, and I thought I could see Mr. Camposano and Mr. Norton and Mr. Green and my father sitting in the same row of seats that they sat in for every single game that we ever played at Watertown High School. And then we went back toward home plate, and I saw one of the best coaches in the history of Watertown High School, George Yankowski. And here he was, in an early day in April. It was a little cold, and he's blowing on his hands and saying, "Okay, boys, bees in the handle today." And for those of you who have played baseball, you know what bees in the handle are. It's when you hit a ball on an early April day when it's about 45 degrees, and even if you hit it on the sweet spot, your hands sting, and there are bees in the handle. And then he turned around and said, "Okay, it's time for our pop-up exercise." And Coach Yanko could hit the highest pop-ups you've ever seen. He was a Major League Baseball player for a couple of teams, and he would put the infielders around the infield, and he would go around third base, shortstop, second base, first base, and stand back there. "Okay, Hoffman." And he'd hit a big one. Norm Hoffman, the third baseman, would settle under it and catch it. "Balsama." He'd hit the big high pop-up to Dick Balsama. Balsama would I'd go around and he'd catch it. Weeden, he'd hit it over to me at second base, and I'd do what I could with it. And then he'd say, Smith. And just as he went to hit the pop-up to our first baseman, Pepe Smith, Greenwood ran in from the outfield over to the dugout, and he picked up this batting helmet. And he walked over, and the coach looked at him and said, hey, Greenie. He said, it's not time for batting practice yet. He said, oh, no, Coach. We knew you the next pop-up was to Norton, and we didn't want him to get hurt. Thank you very much for the memory.
I don't remember any of that stuff. You know, I wasn't going to say anything about playing 4 games against you when I was at Rutgers and you were at Princeton and you were 0 for 12. But I've just been pushed into doing that. Congratulations, Donnie Weeden.